Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining and welcome to this Product People event. Tonight, the session is about surviving puberty as a scale up with a product lead at Smallpdf. And today with us is Leah Tharin, who will present that to us. Before I hand over to her, I would love to briefly introduce myself and also Product People. My name is Alex. I'm a senior product manager with Product People. I joined a couple of months ago. Before, I was a full-time employee in various startups in Berlin. I also have some tech background and had my own startup for 2 years. What we do at Product People is we help companies discover and deliver great products faster. We empower product communities to share knowledge generously. And our community has over 8,000 members already. And you as participants today are surely a part of that. Thank you very much for joining. We also help companies through our engagement. We do the hands-on work, and some call it unglamorous work of product management. I call it basically the groundwork there. And we do this on interim basis, like 3 to 36 months. We onboard super fast, and we align with teams and stakeholders, and we deliver outcomes. And before we basically enter the stage for our speaker, we prepared 3 questions we would like to ask you beforehand. On Zoom, you can basically answer these questions in the pop-up, which should have appeared to you right now, and to all the other participants in the other channels. Feel free to answer the questions in the chat. I will now read the questions to you, just to have a brief understanding. So here we go. First is like, how well do you think you know your customers and their problems? First answer is very well. I think we are doing a great job. Second is, okay, we could know more about them. And the last answer is, we don't really understand our customers at all. Second question is, how well are people in our organization aligned in general? First answer, great. We all pull into the same direction, or good, but we could do a better job in getting a good direction. Last answer, everyone's doing their own thing. And the last question, and I love it very much, is what do you think happens during scaling up? People become more specialized, or people become less specialized, or both can happen. I'll give you now a couple of seconds to answer on these 3 questions. And I think the first question is also something you are quite familiar with, as getting access to customers is one of the toughest challenges, right? Sometimes you speak with them on a daily basis, and sometimes you don't hear from them for months. Looking forward to your answers here. And I think the second question is very much also about getting context, right, in the organization you work with. Sometimes supported by a very transparent strategy, and then visible, maybe with an OKR framework. But you're also looking forward to these answers from your side. And yeah, we have answers. Thanks, Mansoor, for sharing these. So on the first question, we have basically somewhat a split, like 56% say we do okay, we could do a little bit more in terms of getting in touch with customers. And 44% said very well, I think we are doing a great job. That's awesome to hear. So there's 0 on we don't really understand our customers at all. On the second question, 78% said good, but we could do a better job in getting a good direction. So really much what I also expected. But 22% said like, great, we pull into the same direction. And really 0% in a lot of misalignments. It's good to hear. And in terms of the third question, we have like 44% saying people become more specialized. 0% say people become less specialized, and 56% say both can happen. That's quite interesting. And let's see how Leah maybe put these questions or like these answers into her speech. And this basically makes me hand over. Thank you very much. Happy to have you as a guest tonight, Leah, product lead at Smallpdf. And I will now stop sharing my screen and handing over to you. Thank you very much and have a warm welcome here.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me as well. I'm super excited for opportunities like this. I'm just going to overshare my screen here. Okay, there you go.
Exactly. Now you have permission.
Fantastic. So normally I would have about 2 hours to speak about this topic, but I was told I only have half an hour. So I'm trying to condense it into a digestible format. I also try to keep it in a way that people also without an MBA can actually understand it. So I'm trying to talk to you today about the concept of how it is to survive puberty as a scale-up. Marty Kagan, I think, also called this surviving success, which is also something that's funny. But yeah, it's basically about the pain and the pleasure of growing up in an organization that grows fast or needs to grow fast or wants to grow fast. Maybe a little bit about me. My name is Leah Tharin. I am originally a UX researcher engineer for 10 years. That was a long time ago because afterwards I also attached another 10 years as a product manager. And I've been in 3 startup to scale up transformations right now. This is the most interesting one so far. And I feel like at this point, it's time to speak up because I also learned a lot of things in this current one. And I'm also leading the core experience at Smallpdf. Sounds important. Just want to say I really love doing this job as well. And I love my team. So what I'm going to tell you about now is about the company and what this actually means to lead the core experience at Smallpdf. So technically, if you look at our value proposition, we make PDFs easy. And if PDFs weren't complicated, we would probably not be here. All the tools you need to be more productive and work smarter with documents is basically what we monetize. Everything nasty that you can do with PDFs, we have probably a function around it. You know, editing, merging, splitting, signing it, and so forth. We have 50 million active users every month, so we're pretty big. So even if you don't know us, probably click on us at some point. We're a SaaS B2C SMB business, which means we offer subscriptions to our services, and we have around 100 employees in 3 different locations, Zurich, Belgrade, and Barcelona now for, I think, today we opened this hub in Barcelona, and we're bootstrapped. So we do not have any investors. We can do basically whatever we want to. We're the only slaves we are to the revenue in the end, but we need to find the best levers and value for our customers ourselves. There's nobody telling us what we have to do. We're also in the top 200 most visited websites of the world. I think I checked today, it was 174. So as soon as we enter the top 150, I'm going to come back and give you a talk how we managed that. So here's a little brief agenda on what I want to talk about today. So basically, I'm going to tell you where we started, what scaling an organization basically means, and why, in my opinion, you should probably also try to understand the connection between efficiency and adaptability, like basically being agile in the end, and what underlying conditions are necessary to scale successful. Now, I added in the brackets that this is more for the tech industry. It's possible that you're in a sector where this does not apply or not apply fully, but I would say the lessons from the things that we've saw, and also because of the world on just how it is today, they should apply to most businesses. I would say, I would just go so far, but I'm the presenter, so I can claim anything anyways. We're going to talk also about the reality for us, like what this actually meant for us. And yeah, let's just jump right into it. So 2 years ago, we were quite a small company. It was just these people here on the screen, one with a drinking problem, as you can see. And we had 20 people, only 2 product teams. We were quite fast growing. We had ambitions. We still have the ambitions and we still have the growing ARR, so this is fine. We were quite small, and as is natural with most of these organizations, you have a flat hierarchy organization. So you do not have too many things you need to go through. Everything is very agile. You can react relatively fast. And also everything feels like a family. Everybody knows everyone. Everybody likes mostly everyone. So this was Smallpdf back then. But we also noticed that scaling the things that we did in the way that we did them was starting to get harder and harder and harder. Problems started to pop up, and we also knew that we don't want to chase solutions after the problems are completely blowing up in our face. We want to scale now, and we want to make sure that we're actually on top of them. So there were some necessary changes in product culture that we sort of knew have to happen. We had to shift our mindset that we are focusing problems over solutions. Our mindset back then was often like to optimize existing solutions that we have, but we never really understood the problems that the users were really solving. It's not about converting a file. It's about what you want to achieve with this, right? Like, why do I convert a Word file into a PDF and the other way around? This is much more complex than the actual solutions that you present, but solutions are easy to communicate. Another thing that we also knew we had to do is we had to prioritize research versus prototypes first. So when we speak about minimum viable products, instead of just like building something, throwing it at the wall and see whether it sticks, we were trying to front load research. We're trying to find out whether something works in the market before you even start building it. And that only works if you understand the problems of the customer, because it has absolutely nothing to do with your solutions. Basically, we wanted to get from output, so producing a lot of things, to outcome. We're only trying to ship what has impact. Now, when we're talking about adaptability over efficiency, this is the key of this presentation. I hope I can make this case why it's also very important to understand the connection between the two. Basically, adaptability means humans are very adaptable, right? This is why we are the dominant life form on this planet. We can just adapt to every possible situation. But we're not very efficient in a lot of things. We're not the best mountain climbers. We're not the best tree climbers. We're not the fastest, but we're very, very adaptable. We're almost indestructible in many, many cases, right? And so I want to talk about these two things right now a little bit more in detail. So let's tackle efficiency first. Let me introduce you to a nice fellow, Winslow Taylor. And he has to do a lot with efficiency. So now every self-respecting presenter in the tech world has to introduce someone that's not alive anymore. So I'm going to do this right now as well. So Winslow Taylor was alive from the 1856 until 1915. And he was the founder of so-called scientific management. And he was growing up also and living in an era where factories were coming up everywhere, but there was no standardization. Buildings came up, lots of people were working in the same places, but there was no concept to manage these groups of people or this complex work. There was just nothing. It was just like, okay, we have 20 people, let's just fabricate something. Taylor wanted to standardize and optimize for efficiency. That was his main concept. He saw how inefficient these people were working. Nobody was overseeing their stuff. Maybe you had a foreman or something, but largely it was very, very unorganized. He coined the term scientific management. Spoiler alert, it sounds better than it actually is. So if you look at the cover of this book, you can also see some people manufacturing things. And I will tell you why they were probably miserable right now. So he called this the division of labor. This was basically another word for efficiency. And he thought that each step in a process is performed by a different person. What that means is instead of hiring people who are doing everything and understand the context of something, so, like a master's clock manufacturer, you're starting to divide everything, and every step by itself can be taken by an unskilled worker. He also was convinced that there's only one best way, a standard way, to do everything to boost productivity in the end. Also, he thought that managers are separated from workers, this needs to be, and they tell workers how the work was performed. He coined the phrase, managers think and employees do. Very sympathetic. So what was the effect of Winslow Taylor's sort of philosophy? Let's call it that. There was an extreme boost in productivity. Where he applied this, and if you're interested in this topic, I highly encourage you to also read a little bit more about this, like where he did this, there was a huge boost in productivity. He was very, very, very specific about, you had people who were just doing really just one step all day, like one step, next person, one step, next person. The downside was there was no higher compensation for people. So factories started to become really profitable. They started to make much more money, but that money never arrived to workers. Why? Because they were starting to be easily replaceable. There was no shortage in unskilled workers. So basically, his principle also led to lower compensation for people overall. It also separated the workers from meaning, and it was an extremely dehumanizing experience, as you could imagine. It's just not that much fun. Luckily, this is a concept of the past, but I think it's important where this is coming from. Because naturally, when we're doing or when we're understanding management work, we tend to drift a little bit towards this, whether we want it or not. And I'll explain why in a second. Let's look at the current times that we have. So the present, a more modern world in where we all live at the moment. So we have a couple of conditions that definitely seem to be true. The cost of information logistics is not a factor anymore. It's incredibly easy for me to send you a message right now. I'm streaming to you like you're kilometers away, some of them probably hundreds and thousands of kilometers away. There's no cost associated with this anymore. And what this essentially led to is we have never measured more about the world than today because it is so incredibly easy. I can now go with my phone and check the weather in Tehran, and it will be up to date, whether it just rained like 5 minutes ago or not. We've never measured more about the world today. However, the world has also been never more complex than it is today. You might think because of the first two things, we have more control over the world, but actually exactly the inverse is true. What we're calling this is the butterfly effect. You may heard about this, like, a butterfly making a flap of the wings, and then you have a tornado on a different continent. The base principle is this: you can have single actors that can have massive impact in your lives, even if they are very, very far away. This is now also true for human society. Someone could do something on a different continent and take COVID, and it might reach you and impact your entire life because we're so connected very fast. So what does that mean? It also means that it's gotten much harder to predict the future. Imagine you had a shortage of something 200 years ago. It took months until it actually affected the entire world, but you also might not have heard about it, So there's always these two kind of things, but let's just assume that we're all agreeing on the notion that it's harder to predict the future now. Now, what does that mean for companies in the tech industry, or also like in general in the market, and the need for adaptability? How do you make an organization adaptable if you agree that the future is hard to predict? Because if it's hard to predict, you need to be fast to react when something actually does change. And I'm using the word agile here as well. Some people are allergic to it. I understand why, but I'm just saying you need two things. First of all, you need to give collective consciousness. Basically, this is a fancy word for giving context. What we mean by this is that we want people in our organization to know as much as is possible versus this old principle that the military coined, which was called a need to know principle. The need to know principle basically means whatever you need to do your work is all you're going to get. The rest you do not need to know. In our terms, this could mean like, hey, developer, I need a button. Don't ask why, but just do it. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to give people context. We try to give access wherever is possible. In our company as well, everybody has access to the entire data stack that we have. Business metrics as much as is possible. We give a lot of context to the research. Every engineer knows our customers quite well. And this is also one of the questions why we asked at the start, how well do you actually know your customers? The second step that you need to give is empowerment. Now, empowerment is a finicky one because to get from ask me for permission on everything, we want to get to ask for feedback, and that's totally fine, but you can make the decision yourself. It follows the principle that a designer probably knows better how to design than me. Seems to be a surprise to most people. But we're not trying to involve, or like we don't try to tell people with directive management how they should do their things. Now, here's a funny one, because I had a talk with some people the other day. Delegating does not mean empowerment necessarily. If you made a decision and you tell someone that they should do it, that is not empowerment. If you tell people, look, this is the problem that we're trying to solve, and then you delegate the solvage of this problem to them, then that's empowerment. If you don't tell people how to do things, then you're empowering them. However, there's a caveat to this. If you're doing the first, if you give people context, but you do not empower them, then they know what's wrong with the system, but they cannot do anything about it. Sooner or later, they will quit. or they stop caring and they become just like, duds, whatever. If you empower people, but you do not want to give them context, you just want to share as little as possible, you will set them up for making bad decisions. And then you should not be surprised if they cannot give you real good solutions for the problems that you actually start to identify. Let me talk really briefly about the case of Chelsea Manning. Now, Chelsea Manning was a soldier in the US Army, I think, and she walked out with 750,000 classified documents from a high security building, and then actually handed this over to Wikipedia and shared it to the entire world. This was a direct consequence of what the military was doing from what I just explained above. They were giving a lot of context, and they also empowered people to act on them. They lowered security standards. A lot more people got actually access to, a lot of documents that were security highly relevant. And yet they said the added benefit from changing an organization to give people context and to empower them to make decisions themselves was outweighing by far these big bang events that you have sometimes from security, where you just think, oh no, but now we need to implement a process to take away the context from people. And they deliberately said, look, this is always going to happen, but the additional gain that we're getting from actually enabling people, from giving them purpose, from making them understand, will always be bigger than those security risks. Now, to summarize again, increasing efficiency decreases adaptability. The more you optimize your processes, the less agile you will be. I hope this makes sense and you understand this connection, because the more you replace people with unskilled workers, the less they understand about the context, and therefore you have a problem. Now, this doesn't mean that efficiency is always a bad thing, but I'm just trying to make a case here. For tech organizations, this can be fatal. Why? You need to react fast to market developments. I think this is a universal truth. If something happens in your market, you need to react fast. You need to also catch up. Innovation is by definition hard to standardize. You might have your frameworks on how you can do research, but innovation, finding the next big thing, is incredibly hard to standardize because there's no standard way for it. That's what innovation means in the end, right? You were trying to find something that's never been done before. We have a natural tendency towards efficiency, and this is causing an erosion of this principle that I mentioned before. What do I mean with that? Let's assume Chelsea Manning is walking out with these 750,000 documents. Someone will scream, we need a process. This cannot happen again. You're implementing a process. Now it doesn't happen again. Nobody has access to data anymore. But the organization is slowly eroding and you're losing the context, right? But it's really hard to upkeep these things because in the end, immediately when something like this happens, it makes a lot of sense, to implement a process to sort of stop it from happening. So keeping the context up is a challenge to management and a really important one at that. So now let's bring it back. So let's assume I have convinced you and you say, yes, it's important to stay agile, adaptable, and efficiency should not be like constantly on the top of everything. We were trying to do some organizational changes. Now, we knew that things need to scale fast because we also want to grow fast. And we wanted to get from feature owner to outcome facilitator. Now, I stole this thing here from Reforge. It's from a course called Product Leadership. Basically, what you have here on the left side is you have owners, and on the right side, you have facilitators. The only difference is that product managers on the left-hand side tell the team what to do. And on the right-hand side, we have the team as a whole is starting to decide. And at the bottom, you have features. Now, the nice thing about a feature is it's easy to explain. Build me the next, a video conferencing system or whatever, right? So this is a feature. The team is taking ownership of this feature and it delivers it. But what the team doesn't do if it delivers features is it does not deliver outcomes. If the outcome is we want to get 50,000 SMBs on our platform, I don't care how you do it, then you are an outcome-based team. And that means that is the difference. So we started down here as feature owners when we were small, and this is usually also the way that most startups start. This makes sense, right? You have a strong vision, you know what you want to build, you rally some people around, you're starting to build it. But at some point, I would make the case that you want to shift to the top right. At some point, right? We have to focus on outcomes and teams have to own these outcomes. Again, it's the difference between in the past, delivering feature X versus increase metric so-and-so, and your team can decide on however they want to do it. So some key concepts along this way. We want to have independent teams with all competencies in the team as much as is possible. Basically, I call this a startup in a startup. You want to have also guilds to cover cross-team initiatives. What does that mean? Now, if you have teams who are responsible for certain outcomes, so for instance, my team is responsible for the entire value proposition of Smallpdf, with exception of one product. Everything that doesn't fall under this umbrella has a danger of getting a little bit lost in the organization. So for instance, if you have authentication problems, there's no team who is dealing only with authentication problems. So guilds, which are focused around the product, about a specific job. So for instance, the product guild, the engineering guild, the front-end guild, back-end guild, design guild, they can take some of these initiatives and drive them across the teams. And this is more of a personal opinion. I believe strongly in in-sourced knowledge inside the teams versus competence centers. So a competence center is when a company decides, we need to have 5 experts who are doing all the same thing in one team. So you have researchers that are doing the best stuff, and every team is sort of just going there with some requests and then is pulling them out. I am not convinced until this day that this actually works or that this is a good thing. It makes more sense to have one data scientist, if possible, in the team, and then have some experts who are also starting to support them. We're trying to get there as well, and we're doing this. But it makes more sense to have these people actually in the team, in the fray, working on the same problems with the team. So let's talk really about so this was the plan, right? So now we're talking about the pain, or like the reality of what actually happened to us when we were trying to bring this also into reality. There are symptoms of success and growing in a tech company. And one of them is the industry starts noticing you, and the recruiters as well. So as you're getting bigger, if you ever get your bigger funding round, or you cross a specific milestone of employees or whatever, the recruiters start to go through the entire lineup of the company, right? People are forced to specialize. We have seen this now in the survey at the start. Most people are realizing this, but this also means they have to find new role definitions. In the early days of startups, you may have had to change the toilet paper, you may have to service the coffee machine or whatever, but as the company grows, this is getting less of a thing, and you're doing just your one job, right? Like you're starting to specialize and you're starting to get better at it. And this can create friction. And with this, politics and competitiveness is also coming up. Whenever you create teams, have a growth team, you have a core experience team, you have, I don't know, another team over there. The less they talk with each other, which is natural as you're growing up, the more they start to compete with each other as well. Why are they doing this? Why are they getting that? Something like this, right? So this is normal, and it always starts to happen. I think, again, you can only combat this if you're giving complete context and you're trying to align the teams, and everybody is also aware of what people are doing. Basically giving context now on a bigger scale, not just inside the team. It is constant work to keep communication open. And I would even say that this is the main job of every manager. Now, there are some forces of change for different product or like professional groups in these changes. For the product managers, change is probably the most, I would say. If you're just looking like at the operational change, we have to understand we're not the superheroes. We have to understand that we're not the smartest people in the room anymore. We probably never were. We're just really good at pretending. We become gardeners. We are starting to enable the teams and make them better as a whole. The team is better than the individual product manager. I don't have the best ideas. I don't have the best designs, but I damn can make sure that we're finding the best ones and that we're being more, agile and efficient, if you want to call it this way, in finding them. We also have contributor versus managerial path options. There was a philosophy at some point that you need to manage more and more and more people in order to be successful. We're now also starting to look at giving people also a career ladder on the other side, where you just become more of an expert, expert 1, expert 2, expert 3, also for PMs. And this is quite new, which I find is quite awesome. The PMs have to answer the why, enabling the team to understand why are we doing this. And the tech leads, which are also in the teams with us, for instance, or the engineers, if you want to call it that, they answer the how. And if there's any separation of work, then it's probably this. But the engineers can still question the why. And this is also a very good point, right? We want everybody to be involved and not just like separate by this, but that's where the responsibilities lie. We're also front-loading research versus MVPs. I already said this. This basically means we're doing more research before we even start building things. I'm involved in a lot of research. I'm trying to size business opportunities before we even involve the engineers with actually building it. However, the engineers are still part of the front-loaded research. They still give feedback. They're like, hey, maybe there's a good feature in there. Maybe this is going to cost this and that much to actually develop. And the key thing here is that we want to try to build conviction before we go into anything versus untested assumptions. It's not anymore about the product manager, hey, this is a really cool feature. I think we should do it. It's more going to be like, we've done some research. We saw that this is a problem with a lot of people. And I think we have a market and a right to win to actually do something about it. Knowing your customers intimately is extremely important. Everybody on this call is already aware of this. I still want to link ICP studies. So this is like an important customer profile and how to find out what your customers really care about. And really what this all is about, it's about innovation versus optimization. If you keep improving your existing product, you're in an optimization flow. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you really want to get the big swings, you need to do research on the problems. There's no other way. So what now? So what did we learn about all this? Reorganizations are very painful, but they may be necessary. And I would also say don't wait too long. Unfortunately, a lot of companies do wait long. But if you manage to do this early, then it will be less painful because you're disappointing less people, essentially. Adaptability in this concept keeps you competitive. And applying frameworks to acute problems will not compensate for a broken product organization. What I mean with that is that oftentimes when I speak to other people or I debate with them, they say, well, we have this particular problem. Our product managers, they just do not get a specific thing. What kind of framework are you using to get it out of them? Is this really your problem? Or is your organization not giving enough context? Is it not capable of actually doing this? Are your engineers on a different floor than the product managers, for instance? Are they even talking to each other? Teams always should come first. Build your teams first. I would say this is a fair assumption to make, and then you build your organization around. Find out which frameworks work the best for you in terms of building teams. And empowering people and making them use of this power takes time. You have to keep convincing people to come out of the cave and say, yes, you can make the decision. Please try it, right? You can. But it enables them to grow. And I'm a firm believer of the following thing. I believe that people who can grow in their environment, they will deliver the best work of their life. If people are interested to grow and you enable them to also grow, they will thank it to you with actually giving the best work of their life and also doing something for their career. You know, like they grow in their job, they become better. I'm a firm believer of this. And I think that was my last statement, more or less. So here's some material worth reading. I will also put this into the slides. Team of Teams, fantastic book, highly recommended. This is explaining exactly this principle between adaptability and efficiency. Team topologies is a more hands-on thing, how you organize business and technology teams for fast flows and agile. You know, like how do you exactly structure these teams? This was not fitting, obviously, in a half-an-hour presentation. And then radical candor. I keep mentioning this because an honest and direct communication is the foundation of everything. If you cannot criticize each other, if you cannot challenge each other, doesn't matter what you build in the end. One more thing that I actually crossed out of this presentation, but I think it's important, are value creation metrics. If you've never heard about this concept, I highly recommend you to do it. Your teams should actually create value for the users, which then translates into revenue. And there's a really good article on this subject, which is definitely worth it. So you're not chasing revenue anymore, but you might be chasing, hey, let's make as much people create this documents as possible because we know this translates also into revenue sooner or later. Thank you very much for listening. That's pretty much it. I also included some links here from my LinkedIn. We're also hiring. And yeah, we're hiring in 3 different locations. And we're hiring product management engineers, business, UX design. And I hope this was interesting for most of you. And I think I would hand back then to whoever is now taking the presentation.
Thank you very much, Leah. I will take over now.
Yeah.
You can stop sharing your screen. Yeah, awesome presentation. I'm actually basically also a user of Smallpdf. Not yet a customer, but a user.
Why are you not a customer? What can we change about that? What is your problem?
I don't have enough problems, I would say. I think the problem is not yet big enough to become a customer. Let's put it like this. And also your last statement was quite awesome in terms of like create a good product and the money will follow, right? Don't chase the revenue, chase the problems. Thank you very much. And thanks for everyone else who listened. We are now entering the, and I hope you see my screen. We are now entering the Q&A session now. I would love to give you some time to basically raise your hands to ask questions either in Zoom or in any other platform we are in right now. And while I'm giving you some time to drop these questions, I'm basically just giving some more slides on product people, just very, very briefly, and then we go into your questions. So product people is basically tackling 5 use cases and is doing this quite well at the moment. And one of the biggest use case is you got funding, which is always great, and you need to grow your product team quite rapidly. And there we jump in, delivering 1 to 5 product managers on an interim basis, or you have a PM going on parental leave or sabbatical, which is also now more common at the time. And we jump in, you have a PM leaving or already have left the company, and you need to hire someone. We can jump in and fill that gap. You have someone, you have a temporary initiative, you want to check out something very, very quickly, we can jump in and help you there. Or you just want to appraise the product team or a process. And we already do this quite successfully at Zalando, for example, or the Scout24 group or Freeletics. Here's some positive feedback from clients. And what is really outstanding here is like you see that all product managers are basically very much inside the teams as well. They are not seen just as the consultant product managers. They are really grounded in the teams. So that's awesome. And here I would love to share you the current faces of product people. We all have a very diverse background. We are located in the European time zones, but not just based in Germany. We have our legal entity in Berlin, but we have also people working from Cyprus, from Barcelona, also from Stockholm, for example. And if you want to be part of the team of happy faces, I would love to invite you to apply at productpeople.join.com. We are looking for product managers on various seniority levels, from junior, associate to regular, but also senior product management position. And now, without further ado, I would love to jump on the questions. And I hope and I guess we have already some. And let's start. The first question is, I'm going with one from Naheen. Have you faced, so Leah, have you faced difficulties if you have team working remotely, especially the DevOps teams?
No. It's not about, no, yes, of course. Yeah, I mean, it's very, very difficult to lead teams who are completely remote. I would say that, well, first of all, as a PM, you need to have a skill to do this anyway. So I'm not sure whether this was asked in the product management regard, because this is a trend that we're seeing happening right now. So the market is completely hot. Everybody's working from home because of Corona, or because you are starting to recruit from other countries as well. I think it's even more important in these setups that people understand why they're doing what they're doing, and that you're focusing on the outcomes as well. Because whenever you're organizing people that are only together when they're actually switching on the camera, it's very easy to lose context. You know, like sometimes I sit at my job, like I sit at my desk and I'm just like, I can just turn my head and ask the designer something. And these little interactions, they sort of fall away. And that is a shame, right? That is a shame. So what can you do about this? Well, you start to meet more. Of course, I'm not a fan of like just fixing everything with more meetings, but I would say you also have to compensate for these talks that you have sometimes in the cafeteria. You know, like you meet other teams, you hear about what they're doing and all that. And a really awesome way that I found, I think that was like 1 or 2 months ago, is like if you do these team-on-team meetings, you just invite one team and another team, you go into a room for half an hour and you do not have an agenda other than let us tell you what we're doing. It's not about, can you help us with anything? It's just like, let me tell you what we are doing at the moment. And this creates so much alignment because they're like, oh, we had no idea. Oh, this is really interesting, right? So I'm not sure this actually addresses your question, but I would say your solution here is probably a little bit in the processes. You need to have good grooming sessions for your backlog. You need to have good tight definitions. At the very least, you need to have good OKRs that are created well, because otherwise you're going to be guideless for like 3 months. So I would say the processes are unfortunately the answer for this. I prefer to work on place much more as well, but I don't think I have an ultimate answer for this question. It is difficult. Yeah.
Thank you. Part of the question was also like, especially DevOps. We can also maybe change that or rephrase that like to maybe product ops, which is about basically maintaining what you have developed, making it scalable. Are you a fan of that? Or would you say like, if you have a team which deals with one specific problem, you also deal with the scalability and maintainability of that product?
Do you mean whether I'm a fan of product ops as a concept?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So I think it's quite interesting. And I think for bigger companies, it's definitely an option. So just for the others, like what product ops does, it enables other product teams with infrastructural services, you know, like or support, standardizing also some of these processes. I think it can make sense. Yes, I think it can make sense. I'm not a huge fan of it because usually when you start to see them, then the company is in a size where I don't want to work with them anymore. But having said that, I think it's a good concept. It's probably also a necessity, and it's an interesting sort of job for some product managers who do not want to go to a fully facing product manager role. Yeah, I mean, for DevOps, it's the same thing. Maybe if you are a DevOps team lead, you need to be even more on top of what like a good OKR is, because you are dependent on so many teams, or so many people are dependent on you, what you are doing. So maybe one thing that I can say that sounds smart is that you should not try to manage the dependencies. In that sense, whenever you're defining your OKRs, you try to eliminate them, right? And this is also a thing. If we're giving people a lot of autonomy over what they can do by themselves, then they don't have outside team dependencies. It's almost, I remember spaghetti screenshots from where we try to manage all the dependencies. Like if this team is doing this, then this team can do that. And then if just one team fails in the chain, everything falls apart. I just think like eliminate dependencies, especially for DevOps, as much as you can, and do not load on too much in an OKR that depends on other things.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Can only agree on that. Mm-hmm. We have one question from Matthias from LinkedIn. How did you make that transition work? Is actually one question, but maybe you can encapsulate that with the follow-up question he has, especially if your engineers never worked in such an empowered environment. Were there any personal changes needed as well, or did everybody transition easily to the new system?
So is the question how you do this in an engineering-led organization, or?
Not really stated, but I think the question goes into this direction, especially like giving developers autonomy also relates maybe a little bit in like now also I'm responsible, so therefore I'm making mistakes. Can I make mistakes? So like how did you make this transition in the organization without basically creating anxiety basically on the engineering side?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think one way to gain control over something is to give information. I mean, now we're back on the topic of giving context, right? Like the more you understand why things are happening, the more with confidence you can also do certain things. Now, I would make the case to say if you're living in a collaborative environment, this goes much more not only for the PMs, but also for the engineers. if you understand the context much better of what you have to solve, and let's say you have to introduce a specific system, and maybe this is the question, right? Like, am I allowed to make a mistake in this, right? Like, I'm unsure, like, with what we should go with. And mistakes can happen, but if you're doing the decision within the team, then it's also okay to fail occasionally, right? Like, I mean, this is the thing. Like, we also have this philosophy, it is okay to fail. This organization that we have does not mean that we are succeeding 100% of the time. That's the first thing that I would say. So if you have context and you decide together, and it's not expected from anyone to be the smartest person in the room. We're trying to also, like, the same goes for tech decisions. We can do research before we even start building. Is this really the best option? Can we have external consultants helping us with this, like to get clarity? Does this even scale? Is this really the best way on what we do? What happens if we fail, right? Putting this down into a 3-month sort of OKR is a very good way to not overlift yourself and get yourself tied down with a 2-year project that you cannot cancel anymore because you invested too much in it. Now, maybe on the first part of the question, how do you make this transition for engineers? I think it's very important if we're talking about context and empowerment, you need to give context always first before you start to empower people, because otherwise you start to make them anxious. I had an interesting discussion with someone else the other day where they actually said, well, we have engineers that are not interested in context. And I say that's not true. I have never seen anyone that is not interested at the very least in why they're doing what they're doing. There might be varying degrees of like how much you want to know. I get it. Maybe you don't want to go to the customers or something, for instance. But I think for everyone, this is sort of important because we're spending like 8-9 hours every day with the team and with the work there in that sense. So I would say give context first and then empowerment last. Now, if you're living in an organization that has never done this but knows that they have to do it, probably hire someone that can actually deploy this for you, because this is a tough thing to actually do. And I think the product people can also confirm this. Scaling an organization is incredibly tough.
Yeah, can confirm. And thank you very much for the extended answer. I hope that that helped Matthias here. Thank you. We have another question, and I hope I pronounced her name correctly. Blaschka, she asked, like, what would be your number one advice to a product management newbie starting a new position at a company that is growing fast? So basically, maybe at your company.
So I would say that before you even take the job, you should make sure that you have a good environment where you can actually grow in. So you have more experienced people that are sort of helping you. But what's more important is that you don't start to run too fast, especially as a junior. I think you have an amazing advantage, and that is nobody expects a junior to be an expert in anything. And why this is such an amazing feeling, if you start to climb the ladder in the career, it's starting to get harder and harder to admit that you cannot do something. Like, I'm really shit at data. I'm really bad at this. I'm really bad at that. It starts to get a little bit uncomfortable, like if you're starting to climb the ladder. So when you're a junior, be open, ask questions. That's basically your job, but also take enough time. I would say if you start a new job, and that probably goes for every PM, I do the same. Like if I would go to a different company right now, I would say, take your time. I think Reforge calls it the first 90 days in any job. First month, you start to try to understand the problems of the customers. We're not talking about the product of the company. Sure, you can also try to understand this, but try to understand the problems of the customers. Leverage existing research. Watch user interviews. Try to go to people if you have a user-facing product. Try to go to them, see how they're using it. Then the second month would be try to leverage this and try to find out for the team what you can actually do. Now, this is where it may be ending for the junior PM, because this is already quite a big ask. But with the senior together, you can definitely do this. Basically, you're trying to create a wall full of opportunities of things that you think, hey, we could do. And then with the seniors, you're trying to find out and also with time figure out, okay, which one of those are actually the best ones for our team? Which ones take the least time to develop, but also bring the biggest value? And then listen really closely to the seniors, how they're sizing this. How do you get to a good decision? What makes a good opportunity? And I think as a junior, take your time, be open, and constantly ask for feedback. I think this is very important. But being a junior PM that starts in a fast-growing company is not different than anything else. You need time. You do not need to outperform. Just take your time so you can do a good job when it actually comes to time to do it. And I would say, just like as a last advice, because usually juniors don't do this and associate PMs neither, if you don't have a mentor in the company itself, try to get one from the outside. The mentoring club is a great thing, for instance. I know there are other services. These are all free, by the way. Try to find someone that you can be open with, where you also don't have a problem to say, hey, look, I don't think I did this right. I think I made a mistake. And these people are not in the same company, so you can speak openly about it. I think that would be a fairly good advice there.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Hope, Blaszka, you took something from it. Some of our product people, PMs, also are at Mentor Club, and I need to get inside as well. I'm just lagging some time here. We have a good question here on Zoom from Irfan. How do you measure the success of the organizational changes implemented? So then also something like you basically also implemented OKRs and tracked basically the organizational change, and if so, how did you do it?
That's a great question and a very difficult one to answer. I think we should do more what we do with our customers. So a lot of organizations are really, really good at measuring the satisfaction of their customers, but we're not doing this for some reason in our own organizations. So this could be a good tool to also figure out whether what you're doing actually makes sense. So if you look at the first questions that we asked in the survey here at the start of the session, how well do you think you know your customers? Could be a survey that you're starting to send through the entire organization. Then you try to do your organizational changes, and then you see how it actually changes. Maybe the difficulty is to find the right questions. How well do you know? How well do you think we actually know our customers? And then the second really uneasy question, because it's always a debatable point, is how well do you think you know the direction of the company? Strategy, vision. This usually has to come from management. Like, do we have a good North Star? Do we know where we're actually trying to go? What are the trends in the industry that we're trying to follow? Are we all on the same page here? And this is something that you can sort of query. Now, rather than having an OKR where you, I don't know, like you are trying to inform 20 people in some part of your organization about something, you could ask like, hey, after a specific amount of time, do you feel now you have a better overview of the market? It can be subjective questions like this, and you have to usually go by feeling, but I think what's important is that you do it anonymous. So people are not incentivized to also like play the service in that sense. I'm not sure that makes sense, but service for a lot of these OKRs that are really hard to measure makes sense. If you have a big organization, then you can also employ things like churn, employee churn. Do we constantly lose engineers, but we retain the product managers? Maybe there's a problem. But this only makes sense for bigger companies, I would say. Like satisfaction surveys, I think, are a very powerful tool. And also context surveys, like as I said, how well do you know the customers? How well do you know this? And yeah, I don't have a better answer for this, but like measuring the success of a product organization like this probably goes one-on-one with the happiness of the people as well.
Yeah. That's awesome. Thank you very much. We have another question also in Zoom, a question from Nina. What do you recommend to do during the transition where it is not possible to hire teams with all capabilities, also due to budget constraints? Right? In the beginning, you said like you are a fan of basically empowered teams, which means also they have all the capabilities of doing the analytics, design, etc. If you don't have that, you basically need to invite outsiders. What do you recommend for this transition phase?
So I think, well, you have the usual problem. You cannot afford what big companies can afford, which is also a good thing because that's probably not what you need. I think understanding the basics, for instance, let's say you have no data analytics foundation whatsoever, nothing, right? You have absolutely nothing. And now you need to enable this sort of as a knowledge. The easiest data gathering that you can do is qualitative research with your customers. It also depends, of course, whether you have a B2B product or whether you have a B2C product. If you have only 50 customers, any quantitative research is going to be really, really difficult. So qualitative research is relatively easy to outsource at the start. I'm really saying now here at the start, right? Like you can hire agencies, you can do remote testings. At some point, you just need to figure out the basics of it, like learning how to do switch interviews or like learning how to do good interviews. Everybody can do this, right? You may need to broaden your skills again if you do not have the budget to actually get more stuff into the teams. So this may be the opposite, right? If you cannot scale, you actually need to diversify a little bit more. What I really like as a concept, that's also something from, I believe, Ravi Mehta, is this product manager. What does he, I think he calls it a competency model. Basically, the principle is that you have 12 different areas, you know, like UX, research, you have stakeholder management and so forth. And if everything of this is great, then you're the best PM in the world. Now, you can also apply this to a team. So if you're looking at a team, and let's just ignore whether some people like each other or they don't, you might want to have a PM in a role that is very data heavy, that is also having a research background, because they can facilitate some of these things, right? And then you might have a designer that is very strong on the interface, but not very strong on the UX research. And these people can actually help each other to complete this sort of picture. So these 12 things that you need to be a good PM also apply to a team. Make sure that you have well-rounded teams as much as is possible. Worst case, you can always outsource certain things in the terms of like trying to get external resources in. But I would say if you do that, if you hire consultants, make sure you learn from them. Make sure you pair them with people who can actually pick up the knowledge and then actually also apply it. So I would say mentoring, coaches, that sort of thing, rather than just do this particular thing as an agency and then never talk about it again.
Awesome.
I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Looking at the queue of questions, I think we are very much at the end. I would ask one question. I'm very bad with remembering names, but the author of this book you presented, do you think that his approach led into like the assembly line, the Ford company, basically?
Yes. Yeah. He was exactly the grandfather of this, unless I'm really mistaken now. I'm doing now a faux pas on stream. But this was the principle that also Henry Ford afterwards used on their assembly lines. This is exactly what happened there. It was just like, yeah, it was just too much of one thing, right? They didn't really have the need to be adaptable. And that's basically what happened. Yes. But this was the foundation of it. Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And thank you very much also for sharing the insights. Thanks everyone who joined this session. Question to Mansoor, are we sending out the survey to everyone? Yeah. So there will be a survey link shared by Mansoor. We would be very happy if you fill it out. This makes basically these kind of events better, and also then help you later on also to enjoy better meetups and other joiners as well. Yeah, thank you very much again also to Leah for sharing all the information. We took a lot from this event.
Thank you.
And hope to see all of you again soonish. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.